Back on MorningLine. It's our final segment this morning, taking your phone calls, and I wish you could stay all day. Do you guys think you can just stick around? You don't have to go teach a class or anything, do you?
No, I do not.
Oh, so you could stick around. I wish we could do it, but this has been a great conversation with our guest this morning. An anthropologist, Sophie Bjork-James from Vanderbilt, is with us this morning. Also, Sandra Barnes. She is a sociologist taking calls. And look, we can talk, but the phones are loaded. So let's take a few calls here, and then we'll make our way through it. Jennifer, good morning. Hi, Jennifer.
Good morning. What happened in South Carolina was a great tragedy. And we can't change that.
Right.
My heart goes out to them. And I've prayed for all of the families involved. But this was a misguided youth that wasn't taught history properly. And that's a great misconception about that flag. That was a battle flag, not a sign of racism or anything else.
Yeah, I mean...
Now,
yeah.
The Civil War was fought over money, not slavery.
Can I speak to that? Because I feel like there has to be... The Confederate flag is an issue that so many white Southerners are so emotionally attached to. Mm-hmm. But I think that we have to consider that no matter what your own personal attachment is to the flag, we've already talked about this, that for African Americans, for a small minority of white people, the Confederate flag represents white supremacy. And white supremacy, that like a legitimate white supremacy that should so I feel like if you're gonna you have to ask yourself really, like, are you gonna consider that it means something else to other people?
Exactly.
And if so, what are you gonna do about that?
And that goes back to the notion of entitlement.
Right.
If you feel entitled, then it's difficult to be empathetic, and it's difficult to think from the perspective of other people, because part of entitlement is my views, my beliefs take precedence over others. And another point that I want to make is yes, the discussion about the Confederate flag is important, but it's really important to also think about the role that systemic racism plays in this process. And by that I'm referring to racist ideology, racist practices. We're talking about belief systems and structures. By structures, I mean the systems in our society that directly or indirectly condone the massacre, and then condone or shape the kinds of conversations that can be had about it. And so it's real important to think about if we're going to talk about real change, to think about how deeply embedded these views of entitlement, how deeply embedded these views of inequality and expectations on the part of poor and working class conservative white males are. That's indicative of what we're calling systemic racism. And it's complicated. It's really difficult for many of us to kind of wrap our heads around. And because it's so complicated, and because it's so much a part of so many dimensions in our society, then it's hard for people to say, well, what do I do? It's hard to come up with strategies and solutions, because we need so many of them on multiple fronts. We need them as individuals in terms of relationship building, but we also need strategies at the macro level, in terms of the police, in terms of the government, in terms of our educational system. And that's the hard part. But that's the critical part if we want to make this more than sound bites, make this more than just some news articles for a couple of weeks and then it's back to the status quo.
You hope it has some legs beyond that to do exactly what you said.
It's got to have some traction.
Let's go to Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, how are you this morning, Nick?
Good morning. What's on your mind?
Oh, I've got a couple things on my mind. First of all, I was in high school during the racial riots over Martin Luther King, which was horrible, just really, really horrible. And now, here we are again. And yes, I agree that the black people have been held back for so long, and I think it's terrible, because God made all of us. We're all brothers and sisters, and it shouldn't matter what color you are. And I think the internet is a really bad thing. The internet is causing a lot of this stuff. Young people are being influenced by the internet in bad ways, more bad ways than good ways. And another thing, I don't think everybody knows the true history of what happened to the black people to begin with.
And listen, we have a lot of calls on that note. I was going to say, you look at some textbooks. I look through some of my son's textbooks sometimes, and they kind of just skirt over. It's almost like there's a tendency not to want to tell some of the more negative parts of our American history. Like, I want him to see everything, warts and everything. We're a great country, but we have our warts.
Exactly.
I understand what she's saying to some degree there, but I don't know that I can't agree with all of that. Do you agree with what she said?
In terms of just I guess for me, it's important to think about that there is a nuanced history.
Yeah, exactly.
And part of being American and part of being human, actually, is to be able to identify those strengths. I always think about the moments when we were at our best as a nation, and how can we forward those in more proactive ways.
But then knowing that you're getting the facts right, and that was the other point. I lost my train for a moment, but we talked about social media and everything online, and who knows how this guy was radicalized by what he was reading. It's hard to tell these days. You can use this as a tool with what you post, of who's slanting it, who's giving you. Hopefully in our business, in the news business, the legitimate news business with journalists, my opinion doesn't matter. I share some opinions on this show, but when I'm reporting, my opinion doesn't matter. I just want to tell you, both sides fair and square. You don't get that a lot of times on these blogs. And then these people buy into this, and they're not looking anywhere else but one place, maybe online, and they get radicalized.
And this is one of the reasons that we talked about the K through 12 education, because let's say in the case of Dylan, if he is being exposed to the negativity and the negative frames in terms of appropriating the Confederate flag in a negative way, and he's thinking about a race war, well, if he had also been exposed in K through 12 to a different way of thinking about history, a different way of thinking about black people, a different way of thinking about how America is multicultural, then I believe that there at least would have been another story for him to help to counterbalance.
Maybe it would have helped inoculate him against some of the radical stuff he was reading that he believed.
But if it wouldn't have helped him, it would have helped the broader culture, because I think we're naive to think that the extreme radicals are going to change. But the majority of the people, I think, would benefit by a more holistic way of thinking about our history and a more holistic way of thinking about the reality that we now live in a multicultural global society. So you mentioned economics in the past, where many people in the United States are now dealing with a different economic reality. I would even say, because we're global in nature, now you have yet another level of disenfranchisement politically, potentially, and you also have another level of kind of competition that poor working class white males have to now contend with. And it's very difficult to now think, not only am I competing against black people, but I'm competing on a global front.
I agree.
And it fuels this sense of disenfranchisement, which pushes, which results in these backlashes. And right now, a person can say, well, this is an isolated instance. However, if we think about it empathetically from the perspective of the black community, this is egregious, and it's something that needs to really be, it needs to really be kind of, we need to really wrap our heads around that, in the sense that for people who are in it, and for people who go to church, and for people who see the church as a safe haven, this is probably one of the worst violations that can take place. Don't think it's going to stop black people from going to church. It's not going to stop black people from being welcoming to white people in churches. But it does suggest that our society is becoming more and more intolerant if you can come into a safe space like a church and you can kill people.
As we wrap things up here, just a final thought, and it's one that I've been dreading thinking about, but with this Dylan Roof, is he now, and we just have a couple of minutes, someone that other white supremacists, especially if we see them getting angry over the removal of some of these Confederate flags, look at now, I don't know, they're going to martyrize him or whatever, to follow and do? That's what I worry, that sparks something along those lines. Is that the way it could work?
I mean, from what I've been seeing on online, white nationalists are saying he's not a very good white nationalist. He doesn't understand our ideology. And they're all saying, like, the dominant answer is that violence is not the answer. But the thing is, and for anyone who still believes that he was just had like a mental illness that led him to this act, I mean, he was enacting an ideology that is shared by all white nationalists. It's like organized and online. He learned to have this particular view through particular websites and organizations, and he implemented it in a very strategic way.
No question about it.
So I mean, he's very much informed by a particular ideology, by a social movement.
And then he said he got tired of reading about it and everyone just writing about it. Someone had to be the one to step up to do something, and somewhere there is where look, if you want to be a racist and a white supremacist and privacy of your own home, you know, it's America, go ahead and do it. But he crossed the line and all of a sudden impacted other people by taking this stand. And I don't know what it was that clicked in his head to make him do something like, but you know, there's others out there like it.
And it's almost impossible to be a white racist in the privacy of your own home.
Yeah, right.
And that's the piece. And I know you were speaking in jest.
Yes,
but that's the problem, that it
affects
infiltrates
others.
so many areas. And now in this case, we see it infiltrating a sacred space. And so I think it is important to kind of think about the ideology and of this young man and where it's coming from, but it's more important to focus on kind of the systemic undergirdings of it and the people who are negatively affected by it.
And we will be doing that. And you made an excellent point. That's what we need to do. Professor Barnes, thank you. Gosh, they went quick, didn't it?
Exactly.
Professor Bork James, thank you very much for coming on. I'll be back with a programming note right after this. You're in right up again.